I didn't come up with a snappy comeback, so audience, insert snappy comeback here. And welcome, one and all, on YouTube and in podcast land. You are listening to the Tangent Kings. Roll it! Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's, not tonight's, but today's little broadcast. I am G. Michael Francis, and I am here with my partner in crime, Mr. JJ Benks. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm actually doing pretty well. I made some pretty good sales today at my job, and I'm very thankful for my team and my God for landing me this job. And so I've got some wonderful people at my job, and I got a fantastic job, so I'm in a great mood tonight, man.
Hey, that's awesome, man. Glad to hear it. Praise it be God, eh?
Yeah, he's God's been very good to me. We were just talking before the podcast. Speaking of God, I'm not Catholic like Mike is, but the thing that one of my friends purchased for me as a gift a few months ago, I got a Benedictine cross. And that same week was the week that I found out what all the symbols, like I'll hold it up to the camera here just so if people haven't seen it or aren't familiar with it. So it's this little cross right here, and it's got all these letters in it that off the top of my head I don't recall what they all mean, but the way my Norse pagan atheist friend who bought it for me, of all people, one of my closest friend, Haley. By the way, Haley, if you're watching, I love you and I appreciate you very, very much, and you are an absolute delight and treat in my life, and as well as you, Courtney, as well. But she bought it for me, and I might be mischaracterizing her beliefs. I do apologize if I am, but if I am, I apologize. But my point was that she bought this for me as a birth, it was a souvenir in Colorado, and she bought it for me, and I said the timing's so cool because I just looked up what it meant. And we're speaking of God in the podcast today, so I was moving some furniture around and I found it on the floor. I'm like, hey, I was looking for that for like 3 weeks. I found that thing. It's like, yeah, man. So it was very, very good timing.
Yeah, you were talking about the letters of the lettering on it. I assume you meant the lettering around the rim of it.
Yes, because so the cross is letters that go like this. And then there are the three or the four symbols. It's a bunch of letters in different patterns. But
I know around the rim. I know what that actually says. So,
what does that say?
Well, in Latin, I'm not going to say the Latin because, quite frankly, I've forgotten it. But in English, it translates to something to the effect of, "Begone, Satan! Do not tempt me with your vanities. The cup which you offer me is evil. Drink that poison yourself."
That's what it meant, yeah. The way Haley described it to me was, she described it to me in a similar way, but she basically said, yeah, I looked at the meaning of it, the day she got it for me. She said, yeah, I looked at the meaning for it, basically meant, yeah, biggest F you to Satan I've ever heard. And I was like, yeah, I thought it was pretty funny. He's like, yeah, it's actually pretty funny.
I have never heard it put that way before.
That's how she described it. She said it's basically F you Satan, screw off. And I'm just like, that's freaking hilarious, man. Like, I mean, technically it doesn't say that, but like, I like that version just a little bit more.
I have never heard it described that way.
Random question: is drinking booze sacrilegious to Catholicism?
Depends on how much.
This much. Also, Haley, if you're watching, yes, if we're questioning how much booze is in the cup, like it as per usual, and you'll get this reference. No one else will, but you'll get this reference. That it's only a quarter way filled, Haley. But anyway, so this one's actually half filled, but for joke's sake, yeah. But yeah, no, it's not much, and it's like Moscato, I think, so it's like barely counts as alcohol, but Saint Benedictine, I don't know you. I don't know anything about you. But if you're out there and you can hear me, I apologize in advance for this.
Hey, as long as you're not intoxicated, as long as it doesn't impede your higher senses, drink up.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
okay, that's good.
Everything in moderation. Yeah,
Yeah.
there are monks in Europe who used to brew beer, right?
Why am I only just hearing about this now? Haley
I
and
don't know
Courtney are
why.
going to be listening to this and be like, we got to find these monks. We got to get up there.
And bro,
Courtney's going to be she's going to be asking like, do they brew mead? And you'll be like, what? We brew 5 different kinds of mead. And she'll be like, sign me the F up, man.
hey, not only did the early European monks brew beer, in the Catholic Church, we have a blessing for beer.
Well, I know what religion I'm converting to. I picture you. I picture you like just introducing me to all your Catholic friends at church. Like I moved down to Tennessee. I go to your church. I get my off the grid house by the lake or by some big lake or some riverside or something like that. Introduce me, and I meet all your friends and stuff. And it's like, hi, this is Jacob. It's like, hi, are you a recent convert? It's like, I am. Why'd you convert? Yeah, I heard you there are monks for 2 reasons. One, Benedictine cross because it's awesome. 2, there's a beer prayer, and I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, I can't name another religion that has a beer prayer. I mean,
And not to mention for communion.
sign me the F up.
And not to mention
Yeah,
for
you're like, hi,
communion.
this is Jacob. He converted for the beer.
And not to mention for communion.
So it's not just,
that ain't grape juice, my friend. Not that I encourage
and so it begins.
Not that I encourage indulgence in sacramental wine, but actually there is one.
Can I encourage it?
No.
I'm not Catholic, so I can encourage anything I want.
Don't you dare. But there's a famous quip actually from my wedding.
How does your quip go?
Well, at my wedding reception, right? We had a friend of the family there. This is a Catholic family I knew back, when I was stationed on Camp Lejeune, and
where's Camp Lejeune?
North Carolina.
For those of them those viewers that don't know, you said it was what state was it again?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, please continue.
Anyway, so yeah, we're in the reception and we're doing a little toast. Now, my in-laws are Baptist, which I don't hold that against them. Now, I love my in-laws, but we just had sparkling grape juice for our wedding toast. Well, anyway, we take our drink, and apparently one of the kids from that family I knew turns to their mother and goes, "I didn't know drinks." And the matron of that household says in a not-so-quiet voice, "It's Catholic, of course he drinks." And I just realized I used I just realized I used my real name, so I'm gonna have to edit that out.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I already used my real name. It's like, hey, if you're taking notes, please don't dox me. Okay, and thanks. But anyway, it's funny because it's just Haley of all people. I don't know why she's out of my mind right now, but Haley of all people is telling me like she knew she knew someone in high school named Lauren, who maybe someday he'll even be watching this podcast. If you are Lauren, hey, I remember you, man. I got you. Hope your wedding went well, and I wish you the best, man. But
huzzah!
Yeah, Lauren, huzzah! But she's saying that she knew Lauren in high school, and she said like, yeah, it's funny. I kind of was like kind of anti-Catholic. I think she had said this. She said like I was kind of anti-religious, a little anti-Catholic, kind of when I was when she was growing up a bit. But just like I always kind of thought Catholics were like really chill, and I kind of respect that about him. And like Lauren was like he would pray during lunch, and she told me the story where she was sitting next to him, and Lauren would always pray during lunch, and what the kids would do is while he was down, they would like steal a fry off of his tray, and they did that enough where she was kind of like, that's kind of a jerk move to do that. Like this guy's just like it's his religion, man. He's like practicing something important to him, and you're like stealing from his tray. I mean, I probably would have just been there laughing, like, "Hi, I stole a fry," but I probably would have put it right back. But maybe giving a whack on the arm. It all depends on like they were trying to be, jerks about it or not. But she said that, and he says, I was just really respecting the guy. I wonder how he's doing these days. And I don't remember Lauren's last name. I need to find him.
And we're not going to
Yeah,
broadcast
like good guy. But yeah, what was that?
I said, and we're not going to broadcast it.
All right, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, whatever's left. His name is now Peanut. But Sam's probably going to cut that one out of context. I bet that's like half the my brother said. I bet that's like half the reason why like he's so excited for the podcast to drop. He's like, I mean, I'm excited to hear the discussion, Jacob, but I'm gonna chop this up into some spicy memes and be like, oh my god, that's gold.
Oh, especially the gold he came up with last week.
Oh my god.
Which I will now play for you right here.
Like, it's evil to eat a sandwich. It's evil to eat a sandwich. And the next day, it's evil to eat a sandwich. And the next day, it's evil to eat a sandwich. Everyone should have a sandwich. It's good to eat a sandwich. Oh my gosh, because it's like Jordan Peterson says, and like life experience, right? You're like, you just have to roll with this stuff, man. You gotta just laugh at yourself. What's the G.K. Chesterton quote? Like, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. It's like that.
Yeah,
It's like the people that take themselves so seriously. It's like, dude, just chill out, man. Like, just lighten up a bit. Don't pretend you're like this super cool, like, I'm the emperor of the new world order. It's like, dude, just come on, man. Just like sit down, chum around, have a beer. Don't have your like like the way my friend Devin used to put it to me. He'd say to me like, you don't need to have your. So my apologies, I bumped the camera there. But he said like, you don't want to try to blow your mind every single freaking time we go out to the bar to have a drink. Like, just have a whiskey and relax like the rest of us. And I'm like, okay, Devin. And then I was able to relax after that, but just. It's just have you ever met someone like that where someone's so like they take themselves too seriously?
Yeah. His name in this podcast is called Mike. I used to be like that all the time.
You did actually a few years back. I mean, you chilled out a bit, but well, yeah, you see, like when we used to do something called Civil Air Patrol, like I don't know, almost like 10 years ago, almost maybe a little bit under that. We used to do Civil Air Patrol, and it's like an auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force back in World War II. Now it's just a volunteer organization these days where you kind of learn how to march in formation and you and I did color guard, so that was a lot of fun. And where we would hop up in the Air Force uniform and we would present the colors. That was really, really cool that we did that. But yeah, we were I don't know if maybe we both took ourselves way too seriously back then, but yeah, you chilled out a lot.
Yeah, well, sometimes having two kids will do that.
Ain't that the truth?
Because I waste all my energy just trying to corral them. Especially when they both are now walking.
Right. I at work today, I helped this guy who I think his name was oh gosh, what was his name? I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he had a kid named Dexter, and Dexter was 2 years old, and that kid he was just wonderful. He's a smart kid, bundle of energy, awesome, but he was just like running around. Like his dad was just trying to sit down and like just like sell him some furniture. Like, okay, here's a good nice piece, and I'm going to tell you about this. And the kid was like just bolted out. And like, okay, let's go over there and check on Dexter. And then his dad would pick him up and hold him for a second, then set him down. And Dexter would kind of go like, all over the chairs that he was sitting in. Then he kind of just like slouch and slide out, and then he'd get up and just like bolt off somewhere else. And so his dad was just moving into a new apartment, and I'm just like, let's get you some furniture. But yeah, just cute kids.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cute kids today at work, and it was really nice. But yeah, I said to the dad, I said like, Dexter's just like he seems like a sweet kid, and I meant it. I wasn't trying to like kiss his butt or anything, but just be like, yeah, he's a nice kid, and you see that.
Indeed.
versus like some kids are just really like you ever meet just some kids and they're young and they don't get it, but at the same time you're like some of these kids are just like really painfully socially awkward already, and you're just like I'm sorry, man, but like I wish you could kind of explain that, maybe not explain it to a kid, but just like tell their parents like please just don't let your kid be socially awkward. That's gonna like help them out, like help them kind of socialize, help them get some friends, or kind of just help them like just relax a bit.
Well, there was a reason
You ever
why I was a
met kids like
recluse.
that? Really?
Yeah, I was sort of socially awkward myself.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's why I was a recluse. Uh,
Hmm.
but in any
Yeah,
case, shall we figure out
I
what
was
we're
too.
actually going to talk
I
about
was
tonight?
too. Oh yeah, obviously we need to come back to our true tangents, not our like having chum buddy tangents over here.
Yeah. Hey,
All right,
they don't call us the Tangent Kings for nothing.
our double tangents. We're gonna have like different tiers of different tangents we're on, like different categories. Just flash them on screen. Like you just put captions on the screen. This is the part of the show where it's a blue tier tangent, and the next one's gonna be a red tier tangent. So
Yeah,
this week for
it'll be Dennis Prager's fireside chat with extra steps. Um,
hey, we should put that as a quote. just we just like every week we just come up with more quotes or more lines to put on a t-shirt, and we just flash a new one every single week. Like it's like Dennis Prager
with
with
extra
just
steps.
extra steps.
Oh, he would
Crack
not
up the
appreciate
cigars.
that.
Yeah, I think he would. I think he would if you phrase it in like a lighthearted way, because he's a down to earth guy.
No,
He's
that
a
is
nice
true.
guy.
Yeah, I've never actually met the man,
And
but
I think yeah, I just first impression just seems like a really swell human being.
Mhm.
And anyone that likes dogs and likes a good book and a cigar by a fireplace is a friend by me.
indeed. But anyway, let's go over what we're actually going to talk
Yeah,
about tonight, eh?
yeah, let's do that. What do we got?
Well, I figured we'd have a discussion on the family as it relates to the social trifecta as we talked about the past few episodes. And then we'll have our
Mike and his social trifectas.
what?
Let's get your crap, man.
As always.
Keep going.
Yeah. And if we have time, we'll see if we can shoot off into other topics, but then we'll hit up our book quote, and I hope you have it ready this week.
Oh, I do.
Good, good. And then we'll call it a night. So, Mr. Benks,
Yeah.
are you ready to kick a hornet's nest?
Ooh, cool.
Yeah,
I'm ready for it.
yeah, because this is probably
I hear the hornets flying around me. Can you feel it, Mr. Krabs? Can you feel it, Mr. Krabs? He's like, yep, I'm about to feel it now. Yeah. Let's kick the hornets. All right. What are we talking about tonight?
well. Let's discuss the family in relation to the social trifecta. With my first question, something basic, just to sort of lay the groundwork. What do we mean by family?
Yeah. Well, let's see. So we were talking kind of before this, and I think this was a really good thing you pointed out earlier, was that with family, certainly in the context of the Catholic Church that you were, because I was asking you about that, because I my knowledge on the Catholic Church it's pretty it's unfortunately very kind of small, but the idea is that it's been the traditional model, and through the various denominations, the definition of family and how it's formulated, what the framework of it, like how it's made up, right, has been pretty consistent
Yeah,
over the last
it's been fairly
what?
universal, until actually fairly recently. I think it was like the 1960s when,
Yeah,
or even 19. You could argue 1930 was when things started going all bugaboo.
yeah. I think Chesterton's also started kind of when he was alive. I guess he was around in I think the 20s. I want to say, off the top of my head, and he noted in a lot of his stories and or not his stories, his essays and his books that there's this. It's almost like seemed like a lot of the present modern ills of the world we're living in today seem to have started around that time, like right after World War One. It's like all these really poisonous ideas started like shaping the world and shaping how we see things, and then World War II started and ended, and all the pieces were kind of being picked up, and then you got a lot of pro Marxist, a lot of socialist ideas, a lot of not German immigrants specifically, but more of a lot of the people that actively taught socialism, just for example, in Germany and in some places from the Soviet Union came over to the United States and started places like the Frankfurt School, and kind of a lot of American society seemed to like over the decades seemed to like a lot of poisonous ideas that we deal with in our culture now seem to not only spring from that school but also kind of that time period as well. So it's kind of interesting. That's not we kind of you kind of think everything just kind of went to crap overnight, but it's we've been building to this for quite some time, and it's across generations as well.
Mm-hmm.
But with specifically with regards to family, as we're kind of building this context around it, that what it's traditionally been defined as, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been traditionally defined as you've got your father, you're one man, one woman, and they're not only married and they're bound in marriage to stick together through thick and thin when things get hard, but you're also there not only to be parents for your children, but to have children was kind of the intent. Um, and you know hopefully get a partner that you want to spend a lot of time with. But the way G.K. Chesterton put, because I was listening to him today and he's the one on my mind, in his book What's Wrong with the World, he noted that the inevitably in marriage or in relationships, oftentimes you're going to find some level of incompatibility, and the idea was that in marriage you're there together to work through that almost is like it's almost like you're working out, right? Like I could just break at this point, I could just crack under the pressure, I could just blow up, right? And you decide, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to keep going, I'm keep going. It's a quote that my brother really liked from Winston Churchill a few years back. He's said, if you're going through hell, you keep going. Just you keep pushing on, and then you come out of it, kind of thing. And it sounded like Chesterton was pointing out that marriage is a lot like that, where you make the decision to stick together and you try to work through stuff, and you keep going even on days when you don't feel like it, and then you come out. And he said like the true marriage is almost, it seemed to be like not like when you're tying the, if I'm recalling his point correctly, because I just heard this on the way home from an audiobook of like I said, from What's Wrong with the World, but he said something to the effect that it's almost like it's like the true marriage or true love kind of begins when you could have broken up or you could have separated and you didn't, and you stuck with it and worked through it. It was kind of, I believe that was the point he was trying to make. I'll have to look it up and verify that, but off the top of my head he said something to that effect. But marriage has been traditionally defined as that, and I think that what we're seeing in society, and it's funny, I initially had said, let's not get into this earlier, but I'm just like, well, I guess you kind of have to get into this particular controversial subject when you're discussing marriage, is that when you redefine what it means to be a man and a woman, right? When you redefine gender, you also define, what are gender roles? What are we asking of the sexes? Are men and women basically the same aside from physical parts, or are they different? Are they wired differently? Our gender roles are, what men and women are traditionally required or arguably traditionally assigned to do, or maybe specialized even to do, depending on how you define it. Are those societal constructs, or are those something innate within people? Are those, and if men and women are interchangeable, are they then everything else is just a societal construct, or are there innate differences in qualities, right?
Well,
I mean,
there are
just
going
plain
to.
as day, you just see. Oh God.
I was just saying, it's just human nature that there are going to be innate qualities that differ, but
Right.
ideally it's supposed to be. Our innate qualities are to be complementary, not.
Right.
It can cause tension, but not the
Yeah.
breaking point. That comes in a
Yeah.
totally different. Anything that brings it
Yeah.
to breaking point is something totally different.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, and what's interesting too is, I mean, it's interesting. We're kind of talking about, like you mentioned, like the 1920s, for example. Like what a lot of people don't realize, and I think Steven Crowder pointed this out in a video where he talked about there are only two genders changed my mind. So he's talking to people on college campuses. He pointed this out, and I didn't even know this, that apparently the idea of gender theory, right, is actually a very recently constructed framework, right? It's a very recently, what's the phrase? It's a very recent idea that sex and gender are two different things. That there's sex, is your biological sex, and your gender, which is your feeling. That's a very recent idea. It didn't used to be defined that way. Um, I mean, how it's traditionally been defined, and the way as far as I understand it, human beings have defined. Certainly, the Catholic Church, just for example, because we mentioned that earlier, have defined it is that um, a woman is defined by not only your chromosomes but also your reproductive parts, as well as physical differences in your bodily framework, as well as your um, this area, your different chest regions as well. And then certainly, some women might be a tad more masculine, but and some men might be a tad more feminine. But overall, you're still characterized by your organs, your chromosomes, and your physical differences, as well as maybe even your tone of voice kind of thing as well. So there are physical objective ways of differences of gender, but the problem is that when you're changing that definition, right, when all of a sudden what you're changing, when you're saying is how you feel is more important than the physical reality, right? How you feel and how you choose to define yourself is most important, and that's how you feel is the true reality, right? Because if there's no objective truth, if there's no objective morals, if there's no objective anything, if everything's entirely subjective and you can redefine it any way you want, why can't you redefine yourself? It's like, what if I genuinely feel like I'm a man or a woman? What if I genuinely feel like I'm something in between? If you start to define yourself like that, if you're starting with that presupposition, then why can't you define yourself to something to the point like, what if I'm lipsy gender? What if I'm gender fluid, right? What if I'm a plasma gender or gender plasma, right? It's like there are these terms out there that people use and they define themselves as that you're not really allowed to question. You're just like supposed to just, oh, I'm this thing, and you're supposed to accept it, and then you're supposed to agree with how I see it. Like, I insist that you will call me this or address me in this particular way, and I'm going to not have a relationship with you or engage with you or respect you at all as a human being unless I feel like you're submitting to what I'm asking. And then I tell you, if you respect me as a person, right? If you really respect me as a person, you'll address me this way, like it's a nickname, right? It's like, well, if it's just, but which is fine. And like, if you want me to address you as a nickname, that's fine. Most people don't give a crap. I don't give a crap. But when you start demanding people do that, or else, or there's legal consequences, or that, oh well, you, I'm going to assign all these labels to you because you didn't agree with me, or basically like what you're doing is that I'm going to hold the relationship hostage because you didn't do this. So this goes beyond just I want to feel respected, right? This is I'm demanding, like with like a verbal fist in your face or an emotional fist in your face, that you what's the phrase, that you comply, right? And that's the key difference, is that you can ask people to respect you, and some people will respect you and some people won't. But to demand everyone you meet respect you, or everybody conforms to your rules, because what you're saying is I'm forcing a presupposition on you. I'm forcing a how do you put it? I'm forcing a presupposition on you. I'm forcing my own presupposition on you, right? And you must comply with it. You must agree with it, and you must treat me as if that presupposition is true. I don't need to make an argument. I don't need to present any facts or evidence or anything. I just will demand that you submit to my presupposition. I don't even need to persuade you on it. I'm just going to tell you that you do this, or I'm going to scream at you or say, well, it's not about arguments, it's about feelings, or it's about my lived experiences. Which, like, I'm not trying to discredit your lived experiences, man, but like, you don't just go around at gunpoint or like emotional gunpoint. Like, if I like randomly walked up to like a guy on the street and said to him like, started demanding he respect me, and it's like, first of all, why do you want a random stranger's like, why isn't it so important for him to respect you? Number one, like, respect is earned. It's not just given. It's earned, right? You earn that and you build it with people.
Yeah,
Number
yeah.
one.
Just as
But
a
number two is like, why are you so insecure? Why are you so insecure that you need that, right? Why do you need everyone on the internet to like, everyone will agree with you? It's like, it just shows you that you can't handle anything outside of your worldview, and that shows not just weakness, but it just shows that you don't um you can't face any kind of criticism. And it's like, well, that's what's life happens, man. You're gonna get pushed back.
oh, I know, but
Yeah,
getting back to what we mean by family, um,
yeah. It's a good time to come swing back to it. Yeah, but like that's kind of all the stuff that attaches to
but
it.
you were talking about gender roles, and and I think there's this misconception that if you accept the Judeo-Christian family model, then you have You have to accept that the man is the dictator of the house and the women and the children are just blindly submissive. But that's,
Yeah.
in my experience at least, and
Yeah.
that's not what it is at all. It's not submission.
Yeah.
It's it's a mutual giving. Not just in the procreative act,
Yeah.
which results in children, but emotionally, mutually giving. In your time, um, in your I already said emotional, and I thought I had a third point, but it just sort of escaped me. But
They'll come back.
but that's sort of the. I think that's at least one key component to a, a sound family structure, and
Hmm.
that's why the nuclear family, well, what's called quote in today's terms quote the nuclear family. Sorry, I'm a little bit tongue tied right now. I don't know why.
What nuclear? Oh, you're fine. Yeah, nuclear family. But yeah, that's how you kind of have defined it. Because it's here's the thing that kind of frustrates me too is so I kind of noticed that when what seems to be the default, and I'm not sure if and I don't want to wade too heavily into this just particular deal because I don't really know a whole lot about it. Like what's the ideal, right? And why is the ideal there? But I kind of do notice that there is this sense of demonization. I do notice when people say like the man is supposed to be the head of the household. It's like immediately people say wife beater, dominant, alcoholic dad, or he's dominant and it's his will or the highway, right? That immediately, if the dad is in charge, if the man is in charge, right? Um, what that immediately means, like they go straight from dad in charge equals tyranny, oppression, child abuse, brutality, stuff like that, that he's intrinsically going to be evil with that power. But there's also this idea that the woman's in charge of the household, she's going to be kind, considerate, or like somehow all this benevolence occurs and everything's perfectly reasonable. Or even the phrase happy wife, happy life, when just let's just approach it just from a religious perspective too. Hypothetically, right? Let's just throw out a hypothetical. If hypothetically the way Dostoevsky put it, oh sorry, not Dostoevsky, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote Gulag Archipelago, he said very well that the dividing line between good and evil goes right down each and every human heart. So everybody's capable of good and everybody's capable of evil, right?
Right.
Which is consistent with what we know about not only human beings but just people in general from in both the Old and New Testament. We're all capable of good and evil. It's not, and what I kind of notice is this tendency to put all the evil in a marriage onto the man and all the good in the relationship or marriage on the woman, and I think that that's very unfair. Because you, or even in the example of like with the phrase "great power comes great responsibility," right? That if you have all the power, you also have all the responsibility. And because Jordan Peterson pointed this out, he said it's the same way, vice versa. With great responsibility comes great power. And what just that means is that if you're very responsible, there's this relationship with both, right? It's not just you wield power and then everyone power is just so that you can just get everyone to do everything you want all the time. There's a responsibility with it. There's a requirement that you're supposed to be responsible to it, and the reason why I just mentioned that specifically is for the reason that there's this tendency, and certainly in Western cultures, that not only, like I said, like evil in the relationship, like the man gets blamed for like almost everything, certainly in child court, but the woman seems to get not only a free pass, not every time, mind you, but just as a generality, a trend. A woman gets a free pass on a lot of things, and it's kind of expected. The norm is that the woman has all the power, but all the responsibility goes on to the man. Like he gets blamed for everything, but she's in charge. Well, if you're in charge, that who's ever like in a business setting or a military setting, right? Who's ever in charge is responsible for the whole operation, right? If everything falls apart, ultimately, even if it's out of the leader's hands, it's still their fault for not preparing adequately or doing the right thing. It's extreme ownership there, the way Jocko would put it,
Mm-hmm.
Jocko Willing specifically. But it's like there's this. You can't just what's the phrase? You can't just have your cake and eat it too. It's like there's a responsibility. Who's ever in charge, it could be a joint, a couple being jointly in charge of certain things, that you have a responsibility to who's ever in charge, you have to take care of the people underneath you. You don't just get to be an abusive tyrant. But I'm just mentioning all these little pieces. I'm not necessarily saying that I support like men always being in charge, because I don't know. I don't honestly know. And if I and I mean, my bias is that, yeah, I think the guy should be in charge, but I don't have a reason for explaining why I think that's the case, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, to put it simply, and I think this is what you're trying to get at, is every person
yeah,
is different. They're gonna have different qualities, different qualifications, for lack of a better term. So it's really dependent, between each married couple, because each one's gonna have different sets of qualifications. Like I said, for better term, different qualities, and
yeah,
different vices, different shortcomings. It basically just
yeah,
comes down to the actual married couple. Yeah, I think that
yeah.
was that what you were trying to say, or
I think so. I mean, I think that's probably like the best, like most like moderate neutral way of putting it. Because I mean, it's let me pitch it this way. This whole discussion, here's a great way to kind of surmise it in a lot of ways. We all can agree, and G.K. Chesterton also pointed this out too. He said we all can kind of agree what's wrong with the world, right? We can all agree what's wrong with something, but what we more often than not kind of tear each other's eyes out about is what's right. What is the ideal? What ought it be, right?
right, right,
Because I think we can all agree abusive relationships are bad, abusive parents are bad, abusive moms and dads are bad. But then you look at, well, what's supposed to be the ideal? And if your ideal, whatever you're what wherever you're defining what your ideal is from, like, do you think that, like I said, like the whole gender discussion we had before, right? That on the one side, if men and women are in fluid, right, they're not really, and they're like interchangeable bricks, they're not really anything distinct, right? Then it doesn't really matter who's in charge. You just define who wants to be in charge in the relationship, and then it's totally subjective, right? Versus if you're starting with a different kind of a framework where there are certain qualities that about men that make them better suited to be leaders, just for example, which may or may not be true. I don't know, but that's kind of the traditional argument that I've heard, that men are more suited to be leaders than women in relationships. That kind of changes uh, your ideal. So I'm just mentioning here that depending on what your worldview is, you're going to arrive at what ought to be at two very different points. And as a side note as well, I've seen some. I mean, I'm not saying that women shouldn't be leaders or managers. I'm just talking like where you define the ideals dictates where you end up on the road, kind of thing. Like where like if you define it here, you end up here. So you get the idea, kind of thing.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. You do have to define like what people are going to be doing in the relationship. The couples have to define them themselves.
yeah, because every person's different. It comes down to that. But
Yeah,
I don't know if we touched this already, but but we've established that the basic family unit, the mother, the father, bound in a lifelong commitment in wedlock, and their children is that is the basic family unit. Now
yeah.
let us explore, and I think we may have already touched on this, but why is the family, that unit, so important?
Yeah, like why is it so important for them to be married, like stay together out of wedlock? Why is it so important for them to, for lack of a better term, not like just stay married, but just like stay faithful to each other and be there to support the kids? Like, why is that so important?
Mm-hmm. And I can't remember who said it. I think it was Bishop Sheen who once said,
Good choice.
I'm sorry.
A good choice for a quote, but keep
Mm-hmm.
going.
And like I said, I'm not sure if he said this or not. I can't remember, but it was once said that as goes the family, so goes society, and it really does come down to you know. Sorry, my train of thought it sort of derailed and rolled off the embankment, but
Mm-hmm.
but you have that locked unit, and I say that for lack of a better term, and this shows you have a stable unit in which the next generation is brought up and is nurtured and taught. that adds more on to a firm foundation. You see where I'm going, right? Because my
Yeah, I do. One thing I'll just kind of throw out too is like I think, and I'm just gonna adjust here real quick because I kind of got a cramped setup. But I apologize if there's any feedback on the recording for that. But one thing I was gonna say was because from some of the not just literature I've read, but also the studies I've read as well over the years, is that most crime, just for example, right off the top of my head, a lot of it's been traced back to single parent households, for example. Like a lot of criminality, like these, a lot of these hardened criminals, a lot of them or repeat offenders come from single parent households, just for example. Or I mean, if we wanted to talk about something really controversial like homosexuality, right? That would be a really interesting podcast to do. But there are certain dynamics in play there where it relates to, not necessarily in the same way, but just like, this is what I was going to mention just with that specifically, that a lot of that ties back into dysfunctional households, right? And if I get fired for that, I get fired for that. But just mentioning that briefly without going into a lot of detail, please don't crucify me on that. If we do a podcast on that specific subject of homosexuality, crucify me then when I can actually present a full argument. But the thing I was going to say was that a lot, I mean, a lot of mental illness comes from dysfunctional households. A lot of child abuse or parental abuse, they themselves came from dysfunctional households. In some cases, single parent households as well. So it kind of validates what Bishop Sean was pointing out, that when you have dysfunctional families, that seems to ripple into a lot of damage into kind of society and the culture as a whole. Like, I mean, speaking from somebody that was, for most of my life, or most of my early life, I should say, raised by a violently abusive single parent for many, many, many years. And, having one parent that was passive and very absent for my early childhood, and kind of critical upbringing, to kind of just being solely raised by a parent like that. I'll speak from personal experience that that's exactly right. Because the amount of, I mean, I this is another tangent as well, but just like off the top of my head, it's like I was so, the amount of therapy that I had to go through just to be able to kind of get to, like, almost like if you picture a starting line, right? And this isn't true with everybody, mind you, but this is kind of how you feel, is that you feel like everyone's starting at the starting line here, they're all hitting go, and you start so far back here, and then only now you're kind of getting caught up at the starting line, where you're kind of like, finally, instead of like starting the game with like a negative 20 in every single dice roll you roll, finally you're at a 0 or maybe even a +1. And you kind of feel bad because you think, well, geez, everyone's so farther ahead of me. But then you have to remind yourself, the way my friend Connie Smith put it, that you can't blame yourself for being farther back than everyone, because they didn't have to deal with the same things you dealt with. They got to start at a 0. You had to start with a 20. So now that you're back there, you can't compare yourself to where other people are, because they didn't have to slog through that. But yeah, I think like you said, absolutely right. Like, so much can be traced back to families breaking apart. I mean, just even the effect of divorce on kids is just astonishing. It really, it does something to them that you can't really explain otherwise.
And
it does something to them.
And I know I'm gonna.
They need both parents.
Yeah, I know, and I know I'm gonna kick a hornet's nest when I say this, but you could sort of see a similar effect, when you have a live-in relationship. And I know, like I said, I'm about to kick a hornet's nest. But
yeah. Well, kind of explain your thought. Explain your thought more.
Well, you think of marriage.
What you mean with that?
Yeah, you think with marriage, a marriage in the correct sense. With you have the man and the woman locked together in a lifelong sacramental commitment as the ideal. Whereas, and I'm not saying this in every case, I'm just speaking in a generality. When it comes to a live-in relationship, you have a live-in boyfriend, live-in girlfriend. It's just, love, honor, and cherish until they annoy me, or until I don't love them anymore. And that's in my mind what a basis in the child's mind. Say, okay, well,
Yeah.
mommy and daddy are only together if they love each other, or they're only uh, this is only paradise until they stop loving each other. Well, then that could also, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great way of putting it.
yeah. And then in my thinking, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, but that could translate
Hmm.
in the mind of the child into, well, okay, I'm going to move out. One day I'm going to move out, and
Hmm.
I'll likely have neighbors, and I'll be nice and neighborly until I don't like them anymore. In which case, I'll just either be absolutely nasty to them, or I won't help them if they are in need. And
Yeah.
and then you multiply that by however umpteen thousand, and I don't even want to think about a society like that.
Yeah, because it just really it ripples. It really absolutely ripples. Because most people, there's a list used to listen to a lot. His name is Lewis Rossman. He does a repair. He runs a small. He has a YouTube channel. He runs a repair company in New York for laptops, and he's got really wonderful rants on MacBooks and stuff, and Apple. He's got a lot of really cool opinions and stuff, and some great life advice. But one of the things he said is the key thing about treating people better than kind of treating people very well, it's really important, is because 90% of people, 95% of people will just mirror you. They'll just treat you how you're treating them. And that's absolutely true. A lot
And
of people are kind of afraid, like just with social interaction, like, oh, they're going to attack me, or oh, they're going to be difficult to be around. It's like, no, just you treat people well, they will mirror that back. That's why the golden rule is so important.
mhm. And not only will they mirror how they've been treated, but they'll mirror what,
Yeah.
especially in the child, they'll mirror what they see both the parents doing.
Yeah.
And uh,
Yeah,
my wife's
they absolutely
pastor,
do.
you
I did.
my wife's pastor used to refer to children as sponges, because you
Yeah.
don't know, you underestimate just how much they could suck up just by looking at you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Like just for example, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about living relationships there, because I think I want to come back to that in just a second. But one of the things I was going to say is, as a kid, I would always kind of feel ashamed as I got older of how much of a brat I was when I was a little kid, because I would just like I would just be a dick for the sake of being a dick. And I kind of knew I could get away with it, so maybe that's why I kept doing it. But then I kind of started to see how much pain I was causing people, and just how just I guess morally wrong it was. Some people pointed it out to me. I'm like, I don't want to be a jerk anymore. Like, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be a dickish person anymore. I don't want to act like that. I don't want to be that kind of person. So we kind of started to see the impact of how I treated people, and I guess I got a lot more conscientious of that. But living in relationships too. I mean, I think here's the difficult thing that I want to throw out there too, is that number one, I think that most people, the average person, probably isn't religious, or maybe they might be, but they're not really practicing, number one, so they don't really have the set of values in for that ideal, number one. But number two, I think a lot of men these days are terrified of getting married, which I most certainly am one of them in some ways. Maybe not to the same degree of saying terrified, but concerned about it, right? Is that if the relationship doesn't work out, you're gonna get
Yeah,
brutalized in divorce
yeah,
court.
because,
Like,
well, I mean, not just men, but there are some women too who are afraid of the emotional pain that'll
right,
come, and that comes from seeing the
you're gonna
previous
get
generation. Yeah,
shattered.
and you see a previous generation with a 50% divorce rate, and
Yeah.
they're just scared to
So not only do you,
go ahead.
yeah, there's like keep going. You're saying they're scared to what?
They're just scared to give themselves in a lifelong commitment. You know, and
Yeah, because it's so risky.
and you know what? They have my pity. They really do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah. It's I my heart goes out to a lot of people like that. I mean, heck, I mean, with my last girlfriend, I mean, the way we were kind of going was that I guess we were kind of going to that too, even though I kind of knew that wasn't the ideal. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is just like marriage is like it turned into something where not only people are very skeptical of it. I think a lot of people come from divorce households, right, where it's like, why go through all this stuff, right? Like the institution of marriage it's not an institution anymore. It's just like get married because probably because you're religious. And plus, I think for as a generation, I was looking at this one website talking about divorce rates. I should look that up and add it to our sources page for the podcast. But one of the things it mentioned was that people these days, they're getting married. Millennials, for example, are getting married later. They are staying married longer, but they're getting married later in their lives. And they're also certainly there's a higher percentage of people living together that factors into that as well. But a lot of it is like, if you don't believe in the institution of marriage, right? If you don't think it's important, if you think it's arbitrary or just an institution just to oppress people, right? If you think that, why would you believe in it? Why would you expect people to think that it's a good thing if all they've seen of it is just bad and it's negative in their minds? Number one, but number two, there's also a kind of a freedom that kind of comes with not being married. Is that your marriage is that you're expected to keep committing even on days you don't feel like it. If you have a live-in relationship, if it blows up, it's kind of zero consequences kind of thing, right? It just, okay, well, it hurts and it sucks, but we kind of go our separate ways, and that's it. That's that. There's not any kind of like legal or financial, generally speaking, no legal or financial repercussions for that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, thirdly, too, it's almost dangerous to get married in some ways, because you don't know how, if you have to get a divorce, I mean, like, you're going to shatter the kids, and you don't know if you're going to get custody. And what if you find out that you ignored all the red flags with the girl you're getting into a relationship with, and you find out that, oh my gosh, she has borderline personality disorder. She's unstable like a volcano, and I don't want her to be the mother to keep abusing my children. And guess what? The judge says, you know what? No, I don't believe you. I think you're an ass, or, well, you might have to censor that out, but like, you're a butt wipe, right? You're a piece of garbage, and I don't want you to she seems like a perfectly reasonable person, and you're just making up all these stories about her, so I'm going to give her custody. And it's like, no, I lived with her for 14 years, and she is a terrible person. She just knows how to act. She's putting on this cutesy face, and you completely bought it like I did. She's a psychotic, and now she's got control of my kids, and I can't see them because she moved out of state, and now there's no consequences, right? So it's these situations where it's like, it's so risky. Mm-hmm. So I kind of get where people are like, I'd rather what's the phrase? I'd rather have a lived-in relationship, right?
Yep.
Instead of get married. I mean, I personally still want to get married myself, but like, I'm so concerned. Like, please, God, I'm asking you and I'm begging you on my knees, not only bring the right girl into my life, but like, primarily, please, I want to get married once, and I want to stay married once. I know that that's not always possible, but please, that's what I'm asking for. I don't want to commit to somebody and then keep committing over and over again, and then find out that they're not, committed to the same way, or that they change a lot too. So, like I said, there's all these pieces in play. So I am really empathize with a lot of people is what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah, but a couple of things that crossed my mind while you were talking. First off, at the point you just made, where things may become impossible. Remember, all things are possible for God. And I sort of thought of Saint Monica, who is the mother of the great Saint Augustine, and she prayed for her husband and her son well into old age. And it was only somewhat later in life when St. Augustine finally converted from paganism to Christianity. Well, I don't think he actually... I think he was a lifelong Christian, but he was sort of what we call an apostate. Someone who has the label Christian but doesn't actually believe the doctrine of the faith. As he quipped once...
Christian in name only,
yeah, something like that. And I think he actually quipped once in his in his confessions, that he one time said, God make me a saint, just not yet. But to your point number two, in the reasons why young men and women don't get married, because it feels like a more free relationship. Well, I will throw in that that comes from a wrong understanding of what freedom is. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. That's license. Freedom.
Yeah.
And I love Father Karapi's way of putting this. Freedom is the power to do what you ought to do. So you could call it grace, call it great determination of will. But but basically is this force that drives you to do what you ought to do. That's sort of a rudimentary way of putting it, But But yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing too is, uh, here's how I want to put it. I mean, true liberty is when you can do, because here's the hard thing is that on the this gets into a really deep philosophical discussion on like what's liberty, what's true liberty, right? I mean, I think people need the ability to be able to make mistakes. They really need the freedom to be able to make mistakes, do like learn from them, do wrong, because that's the only way. Like not like do wrong for the sake of it, but learn from them and correct. That's the only like sort of you're walking through a dark maze and you keep banging your head against the wall until finally, like, here's a wall, here's a wall, here's a wall, until finally you're like, oh, now I'm figuring out how to walk through this thing. Oh, now I figured a way out, right? And people, you need consequences to your actions. You need accountability, and you need, it's just, certainly if you're doing something very wrong or like a grievous injustice or like a big violation of not just the social order, but just do something just really just disturbingly unethical. You need strong consequence of this stuff so people can learn and realize, oh, that wasn't the smart thing to do. Oh, that wasn't the right thing to do. Right? You need that, but mistakes is how we learn. We attach, and I think human beings do this in general, but certainly like the average society, they attach so much emotional distress and panic and horror and like, oh my gosh, you made a mistake. Oh my goodness, that's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. Like people freak out. They absolutely freak out when you make a mistake. Versus, I think as you kind of get older, certainly that's been my journey and my experiences, reminding yourself, no, mistakes is how you learn. That's how you correct. And you focus on, okay, what do I like about the situation? Get excited about, I know that I made this bad mistake, but I'm going to do better next time. Or I'm so excited to do it right next time. Like there's an eagerness there that, Cyrus the Great of Persia 2,500 years ago also kind of modeled too. And Xenophon's Cyrus the Great, he modeled that. But just like, you learn from mistakes, and you need the freedom to be able to do that. Gandhi had a quote very similar to that, where he said, true freedom means that you have the ability to make those mistakes. Because if you can't, if you're not allowed to make any mistakes, well, not only, I mean, number one, you can't learn, but number two, it's like, how much freedom do you really have if you're not allowed to kind of, violate the rules, right? If you're not allowed to do that, how are you, like, say for example, like maybe the state has some kind of draconian order of like you can only fornicate under consent of king, and you violate that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're and then it's like you off to the gallows with you, versus like, okay, well, you violated it, but you can, here's the consequences, but you can still, how shall I put it, you can still you still have, there's forgiveness, right? You still have the ability to make a mistake. Like, nope, you're one and done, you're forever an evil person, you're forever a heretic. Which, if you say, for example, like, go ahead and say I'm a conservative or that I support President Trump on Twitter and watch how fast you get crucified. It's like a countdown.
Say that while
like,
walking in downtown Minneapolis and see how fast you literally get crucified.
Yeah, count the minutes it takes until someone calls you a Nazi or a white supremacist or something.
And
like,
that's the best case scenario.
You're Trent. Yeah, it is. It's like that, right? I'm just mentioning that because like you're not allowed to be. That's the territory you start to get into when you're not allowed to either make mistakes, or you're not allowed to kind of go against the social order because maybe you have a reason for supporting a particular political candidate. Maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe you've got a really good persuasion, right? So you have to be able to do that. So I'm mentioning all that because that factors into liberty too. Because, I mean, with your liberty, you really should be doing the right thing. But it's like what we said earlier, like with G.K. Chesterton, it's like we all can agree what's the wrong thing, but what is the right thing? What can we agree on? And then you start to assert that, and that's when people start to get kind of a little mean, like, no, F you, that's this thing. No, it's this thing. This is the ideal. This is the ideal. And you have to have a means of sorting that out and arguing what's the best way of, what is the ideal? What are we supposed to do with that freedom? What's our moral and ethical responsibilities to our fellow man as ourselves and our God? And you kind of define it from there.
Indeed, and I think we were also touching on the in that you sort of touched on what is free will as opposed to freedom. Free will is definitely a component to freedom, the ability to make that mistake, right? Because nobody's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There is such thing as flawed human nature.
Yeah.
I'm just, my point was, the freedom being the power to do, the power to do what you ought to do. That's just rightly directed free will. Of course, people are going to mess up. That's also where mercy comes in. Mercy and compassion. But in any case, we are actually starting to run low on time here. So you got any little tangents?
I'm just about up for tangent. I think because we really my apologies to pump the cam again. We really like last episode. We really touched on a lot of really fun, interesting topics that I think are definitely gonna lead to a lot more discussion. I'll take this time right now since we kind of covered everything. I wanted to personally thank our viewers for watching. I think last episode got up to about 22 views, and that was really, really cool. So I wanted to thank each and every one of those 22 people that have watched. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for checking our podcast out. So it was a short period of time where you watched the whole thing. I want to personally thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Special thanks to Commando Cart and Valdor on Honest Angels for watching as well. I really appreciate you guys a lot. And everyone on my brother's server of you might need to bleep it out. I'm just gonna say the names.
Oh God.
Yeah, you probably do, but it's like this is once or twice. I don't. So it's an amazing server. But everyone on the server, just want to say thanks for watching it. Gigglebug, Caleb, I really appreciate you, and obviously my brother and everyone else. Like, I really love you guys. Really appreciate you. When we post it, please leave a comment either on the YouTube video or on the Discord link. Comments, likes, upvotes, all of it really, really helps us figure out like what content that you guys want to see more of and what content you don't want to see. So any kind of feedback at all, just throw it at us, and we really appreciate it a lot. And thanks for posting it. Really appreciate the engagement, and we will be sending another one your way next week.
All right, and without further ado, Mr. Benks, your book quote, please.
All right. I'm going to throw... So this is one that the late Ravi Zacharias had quoted, and it's also from Chesterton because we're kind of on a G.K. Chesterton spiel this episode. But he said, quote, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found too difficult and left untried." And I think Marx had a similar sentiment to that as well.
Somewhat ironic.
But just try to live... Yeah, but just live the ideal, and you'll be like, gosh, this is hard. Like, you can't live it on your own. You need God to come in, because waiting to have sex before marriage, that's a hard one. Anyway.
Well, nothing worthwhile is easy.
Quote. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you next week. Same time, same place, sort of. Depending on when I can actually edit this and get it up.
Same bat time, same bat place. That's from the old Batman live action shows in like I think it was like the 60s, I want to say,
yeah.
70s. Anyway.
Yeah, the original Batman.
Adam West.
It's
fun stuff.
Anyway, so hope y'all have a good day. God bless.
All right, thanks, guys. God bless, guys. See you around. Bye.